Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live stream. Hopefully, I won't have any problems with the sound on this one. Um, this evening, or for this live stream, I'm just going to talk about inner insulation. What I mean by that is stuff I do really to help myself warm up again after going cold swimming. And I'm going to talk a little bit about cold therapy and its potential benefits and why I do something so mad. Before I get into it, the usual disclaimer, I am a medical herbalist, so I will be talking about things from a professional perspective, but obviously this is the internet. I can't prescribe or diagnose anything over the internet. If you do have any medical issues, please do go and see a professional medical herbalist or your doctor. I will stick some references below this video or this podcast if you're listening to it later in the week. So, anyway, right. What I really just wanted to do, it's going to be a fairly short and sweet one tonight because I haven't had much time to prepare, but I thought I'd do a bit of a show and tell. So I've been going cold swimming once a week, or I should say wild swimming, because it's only really cold at this time of year. This is being recorded in December 2023. At the moment, last week I went, the water was 4 degrees Celsius. Don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Sorry, American and international listeners and viewers, but it's cold. It's very cold. So yeah, it's. I won't swear, but like we say, the people who go there regularly say if it's once it's sort of below 12 degrees, it's cold. Once it's below 10 degrees centigrade, it's very cold. And once it's below 5 degrees, it's very effing cold. So, and I'd agree with that. And it does seem to be quite logarithmic, meaning that just from experiencing it, logarithmic is probably technically inaccurate. But what I mean is that 1 degree doesn't always feel like 1 degree, because say the difference between 12 degrees and 10 degrees, it's 2 centigrade difference, isn't always that remarkable. Whereas the difference between 4 degrees and 2 degrees is. So, because it's literally half as much again, right? So, it's very noticeable. Anyway, the reason I started going cold swimming in 2018 with a friend of mine, because we both had the idea that we wanted to do it for a while. And I think he'd been inspired by watching a documentary about the Hampstead Ponds swimmers. And I think this was, I'm not sure if Wim Hof had already had his documentary recorded by Vice by then. I think he probably had. I'll link that documentary below because it's very entertaining. The original Vice documentary of Wim Hof, the Iceman, who exposes himself to cold and heat and extremes of temperature, and teaches breathing techniques to help the body adapt and so on. But I think it's got several benefits. The psychological benefits seem to me to be an increase in stress resilience, because you're voluntarily putting yourself through a fairly extreme physical stress. And by doing that voluntarily, you sort of increase your capacity to absorb stress in other areas of life. It's not magical, but it's helpful. I think it also has a significant antidepressant effect. And there's some research to back this up. It seems to increase the level of noradrenaline in the system, which is a stimulating neurotransmitter or brain chemical. It's also sort of pain killing and antidepressant. And I would guess it also stimulates opiate or endorphin release as well. Uh, One of the things it does thermally is it increases the development of something called brown fat, which babies have. But brown fat is metabolically active fat. It's fat, I think, that burns energy and generates heat, which sounds too good to be true, but it's a thing. So it will it'll increase your body's stores of brown fat, which is calorie burning fat cells in a way. I'm going to have to find some links on that because I'm not sure if that's technically correct, but I think it is. I know that cold swimming exposure definitely increases the production of brown fat, and that is thought to be a generally good thing as far as your metabolic health goes. certainly, ordinary fat cells, ordinary adipose cells, an excess of they are just energy storage, but obviously an excess of them, obesity, not a good thing in terms of health risk. But brown fat is pretty good because it's very metabolically active. So it literally it burns energy and it produces heat, I think. So anyway, those are some of the benefits that I know of. But the main reason I wanted to get into it was to challenge myself, and also to improve my immunity because I'd read a little bit about cold showers and cold exposure improving immunity, and it certainly has done that. So the way I envision this, and I'm not sure this is again technically correct, but I suspect it's something like that. One of the principles that's often invoked is mitohormesis, which means um, you kind of subject the body to a bit of stress and it responds by upgrading itself a bit, adapting to the stress. So that's the TLDR of mitohormesis. It's actually responding, it's actually describing the word mitohormesis, I think, is referring to mitochondrial hormesis, mitochondria being the energy battery of every cell in a eukaryotic organism that is like animals like humans, but also eukaryotes. I think things like all vertebrates are eukaryotes. Can't remember the technical definition of a eukaryote actually, but it's basically a lot. Most biological organisms which have cells with mitochondria in, to give you the circular definition. But I'll find that. I'll remind myself. So much one forgets. But anyway, they are mitochondrial hormesis, which is, I think, hormesis is the ability to adapt to stress. So the principle, the way I look at it is, it's kind of like um, subjecting your body to a little bit of cold stress increases its ability to absorb stress. So I always think you have to have enough springs in your trampoline to benefit from it. So I wouldn't recommend anybody to start doing cold showers or cold swimming or anything like that if they were already very under the weather, if they were very sick or very run down, and particularly if they already felt very cold and were sick and run down. But um, perhaps surprisingly, if you're a person who feels cold all the time, it's almost I think it's almost always beneficial. It's just I would say if you're cold and sick all the time, then maybe wait until you're a little bit healthier to do it. Um, the reason being, as I say, it is a stressor. So if somebody's on the cusp of being admitted to hospital, it's probably not best for them to have a cold shower or a cold plunge. But if you are somebody who feels the cold all the time, then it would be quite a good thing to do. Which brings me on to the subject of this presentation. So some of the things because I used to feel cold all the time, like my flat, my apartment was greenhouse temperature year round. It's like an orchid. I had to have temperatures above 20 degrees Celsius all year round. So since doing this, my apartment is currently around 14 degrees Celsius, which is not warm, and I'm fine. I must admit, in the day when I'm working, I do put on a little onesie. I like to get comfortable, but I'm fine with this ambient temperature. It's not such a problem. Whereas 10 years ago, I would have been absolutely bone cold. And I think I owe that a lot to the cold swimming. So my circulation still isn't great, but my hands now I can feel them. So it's definitely improved the circulation. And I think there's an incremental improvement year on year. So my current routine, I know some people go for a cold swim every day. I personally just go once a week and then have a cold shower 2 or sometimes 3 times in the week just to sort of keep myself adjusted. And at this time of year, I will do something else to train my hands and feet because those are the parts of the body that really hurt when the temperature goes below 5 degrees. So um, just to walk you through sort of what happens when you get into the cold water. The first thing that happens is you're sort of fine for about 2 seconds. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die because it's really cold. So you're kind of puffing and blowing for about a minute. And then the endorphins start to kick in. And that isn't like a rush of pleasure and suddenly you're warm. It's like suddenly, oh, I'm okay. And your core feels warm. And it is because you've got peripheral vasoconstriction going on. You've got a bunch of adrenaline and noradrenaline being kicked out, and that constricts. That's epinephrine and norepinephrine for American viewers. That constricts your peripheral blood vessels, so it keeps most of the blood in your skeletal muscles and particularly in your core to keep your core warm. Survival mechanism. But of course, that leaves your hands and feet relatively cut off. So for those of us with poor circulation, that can be very painful. And I don't have the extreme version of that, which is Raynaud's syndrome. But people with Raynaud's know all about this. Really, they get painfully cold hands. And I think we've all had that at some point. Most of us, I'm sure, where your hands get really cold, and then you go in and warm up quite quickly, and they absolutely kill. I'm sure maybe some people haven't, but a lot of people will know what I'm talking about. Well, people with Raynaud's, their hands and feet can do that all the time. It just gets a bit cold, and then the hands sort of go through that cooling and reheating thing, and it's very painful. And they get poor, like their fingers and toes go purple really easily, and there's a lot of pain involved with that. So going into the cold is sort of asking for that, really. You're bringing it on deliberately. And the interesting thing is you can increase your resilience that way. So I know that for people with Raynaud's, one of the recommended treatments, and I will link some videos about this below, is to literally use ice water. And I did this evening because at this time of year, when the temperature of the ponds goes below 5 degrees Celsius, my hands can get really painful, and it's always a shock when I go in there this time of year. Oddly, after 2 minutes, my core feels okay. I complete my swim, I get out, and then usually at that point you feel great. And you have a cold shower, put the clothes on, and then you start rewarming. And at that point, that's the other uncomfortable bit. So the first uncomfortable bit is when you first get in the cold water, and the next uncomfortable bit is the other side. And I actually think it's the more uncomfortable bit now. It's the bit that I dread a little bit sometimes when it's really cold. It's not the getting in, it's the bit where you're reheating, because you get this thing called after drop. And essentially what's happening is all the warm blood is locked in your core, your cold blood is in your peripheries, because you've had all your blood vessels have constricted to keep your heart and your essential organs, your heart and your brain and all the bits in the middle that keep you alive, supplied with warm blood. But all the blood in your peripheries is now really under temperature. So as you put your clothes on and your body realizes, oh, you've got insulation, your blood vessels start to dilate again, and all the cold blood from your peripheries goes right into your core. And sometimes you can feel it like a minute or so after you get dressed again. It's like somebody's pouring black ink down the back of your spine and into your heart. It's just like, oh, like you can just feel your core getting really cold. And that is the bit I don't like, because then you can really start to shiver. But that is nothing compared to the pain of the hands and the feet when the water is really cold and you haven't trained them. And it usually catches me by surprise. And it did a bit this year. I went swimming last week, and the previous week the water was 8 degrees. And then last week it was 4 degrees. So it halved in that time. And it had gone under the magic number of 5 degrees, which for me is hand pain start time. And I had done a bit of ice water training for my hands the day before, but it's not enough. And so I drove home, and by the time I got home, I was literally crying with the pain for 5 or 10 minutes. So yeah, the best thing to do to prevent that, and as a really good treatment for Raynaud's or poor circulation in general, is to do some ice water hand and foot training. So you get a bucket and shove loads of ice water in it and a bit of salt in the water. That makes the water, I think, retain the cold a bit more, interestingly. And you do that. I'm not a physicist, so I do not understand why, but perhaps somebody with physics could explain it. And then with the hands, you do a similar thing, a bowl of iced water. I tend to have 3 bottles filled with frozen water in the freezer at all times, so that I can just pop them in a bowl of cold water in the freezer, and it'll chill that water really quickly. and then you stick your hands and feet in there and set a little timer. Now, if you do have bad Raynaud's or really bad peripheral circulation, you might only be able to tolerate 20 seconds or something to start with. That's fine. You just set the timer for so I set it for 3 or 4 minutes, but you set it, you put them in for as long as you can tolerate, then you take them out and let them warm up for another 20 seconds, and then you put them back in, and you just do that for a minute or two, and you build up gradually. So you can build up holding your hands, and it will build up if you do that every day. It only takes, in total, the whole process takes 10 minutes just to get some iced water for your feet and hands set up. If you've got some bottles in the freezer that are filled with ice water already, you can just use them as giant ice cubes in the water, and you can stick your hands and feet in there for a couple of minutes. And again, I'll link some videos below this video or podcast so that you can have a look at some detailed procedures. But the basic is that: bowl for your hands, bowl for your feet, ice water, stick your hands and feet in, time it for 10, 15 seconds. And then as your hands, as you do it every day, you'll be able to increase the time. And the point of that is that your circulation will gradually improve, and your ability to, your pain level with cold will decrease. So, and I've learned that by direct experience, because every year when the temperature in the ponds goes below 5 degrees, my hands and feet used to kill. And I've seen, like, myself coming out of the ponds, like, what, sometimes it was busy in winter. And I remember last year there was this sudden cold snap, and we had a really busy day at the ponds. There were several of us, and I include myself in this, literally crying with the pain when it suddenly got really cold. And there was one guy stomping around going, "This feels like peripheral neuropathy." He used to be a soldier, and he's stamping his feet up and down, because literally when your hands and feet are so cold, it's agony. But this way, if you do this every day, you can prevent that. If you're mad enough to go cold swimming, as I do, which I would recommend because of the benefits that I mentioned at the top of this live stream. But it's also useful if you suffer from Raynaud's. And I do wonder as well about that cold hand and foot therapy. It may be good for neuropathy, not in terms of resolving it, because neuropathy, which is, by the way, nerve cell damage, which can be the result of, say, something like chronic diabetes, or some drugs like chemotherapy, some conditions like HIV. There are various medical issues that can result in neuropathy, which is like, at mildest, it's sort of like mild pins and needles. But at its worst, I had a client with MS some years ago saying, like, her legs felt like fizzy concrete was being poured into them. That is severe neuropathy. So I've often wondered whether the cold hand and foot treatment might be quite good for that, because it certainly improves pain tolerance, in my view. But there are some other little herbal hacks that I do when I go cold swimming in winter, and these increase the rate of recovery. You can't leapfrog entirely the recovery process, unless I was, I don't know, to do something mad like take a painkiller or some opiates before swimming, which I wouldn't recommend. I think that's probably a guaranteed way to give yourself problems. But you can accelerate recovery, and some of these herbal hacks are sort of generalizable to other conditions. So one of the things that I do is that this is my little recovery kit that I take when I go cold swimming. So what I put in, this is just for hands and feet. So what I've got in here is a little ointment that I make. If you can see that, can you see that? It's just, but it's like all the cayenne has sort of, it's not focusing, but the cayenne in it is settled at the bottom. So give it a shake. And that's, so all this is chili oil with some powdered chili in it. My other little thing I've got in my tin here is a little vial of powdered chili or cayenne. I'm not doing this camera thing right, am I? But can you see that? I don't know. It's not focusing properly. But so this is just chili oil with powdered chili and a little bit of chili tincture in it, which is an alcohol extract. Essentially, it's a lotion of chili, and I whack this on my hands as soon as I get out. And I also have, in a little bag in this tin, I have a pair of latex gloves, rubber gloves. So as soon as I get out, I whack the chili oil on my hands, put those latex gloves on, and then the chili oil is held close onto my hands, and that will start to work within a couple of minutes. And that really helps the recovery. So it means I drive a bike. So when I drive home, it used to be I would be really in pain on the bike, and now I'm not. So that's good. And I use the powder for feet because I don't really fancy getting chili oil all over my socks, and they don't make latex glove sock things for your feet. So I sprinkle that in my socks. That can cause problems when you come out of the water because your feet and your hands aren't moving properly. So that's the only difficulty there. But those really help speed up recovery. And both of those techniques are great for Raynaud's and peripheral neuropathy as well. So if somebody has peripheral neuropathy on their feet, sprinkling cayenne just so I want to make a distinction. Chili powder can sometimes be straight up cayenne pepper, but sometimes it has onion powder and other things in it. Those won't hurt, but you don't want that really. You want straight up cayenne pepper. So if you're using chili powder, make sure it's just got the one ingredient, and that's powdered dried chilies for medicinal purposes. And you'd sprinkle this in the socks. And you can make a little liniment. As I say, you could just use straight up chili oil. You can fortify it by adding a little bit of powdered chili to it as well. And if you have some chili tincture, that's an alcohol extract of chilies, add 1/4 of that to make a little emulsion. That'll make a much even stronger, faster acting liniment. And you can use that on your hands. And what that does, capsaicin in chili, the spicy stuff in chili, is known as a tachyphylactic. And tachyphylaxis is this posh name for what a phenomenon we're all familiar with, which is when you eat spicy chili, if you eat it regularly, you can tolerate hotter and hotter and hotter chili. And that is because the capsaicin causes the little nerve endings to fire off something called substance P, which is a pain producing compound. That's why chili produces this sensation of heat. But as the capsaicin keeps stimulating them, they run out of substance P. And if you use chili regularly, it causes this desensitizing effect. So it's incredibly helpful for that. It does two things for the peripheries. It increases the circulation and it reduces pain, particularly when used regularly. But it can do that pretty fast. So for peripheral neuropathy and that, or for Raynaud's. The second little hack that I use, and this is more for restoring my internal core temperature, is what I call a transfusion tea. So this is a 2-liter thermos. So I just make the key thing about this is getting lots of warm liquids into my core. So I just make 2 liters of tea, but I like to herb it up because I'll put in lots of herbs that are warming, that increase central and peripheral circulation, and that also have a bit of an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effect. So you might think that the antioxidants would ruin the mitohormesis that I referred to earlier, which is one of the benefits potentially of cold swimming, and incidentally, the opposite, hot saunas, and also exercise and many other things that stress the body but make it stronger later on as a result. Is the fact that you are increasing oxidation, you're creating stress, you're creating oxidative reactions, and then in response to that, your body sort of ups its game and increase its defenses and self-repair. You might think you're undoing that by including loads of antioxidants in a tea. I don't think so, because I think the bulk of the stress happens in the water and shortly thereafter. And then I just look at having something like this as putting out a few unnecessary fires and helping the body restore its equilibrium more quickly. I think all you want is a short, sharp burst. And anyway, I feel it's beneficial, and it certainly helps me get to temperature more quickly. So ingredients for this tea, and this is just my own recipe, is a couple of bags of rooibos tea, just because it tastes pleasant. It's antioxidant as well, and 1 cinnamon stick. Again, tastes pleasant, but also warming. It increases peripheral circulation. And then I make some milk for the tea the night before. So I get a little Kilner jar like this, and a giant refillable tea bag like this. You can get these off Amazon. These are great as a herbalist. I use these a lot. And I fill this about 2/3. So this is quite big. You see, that's my hand. So these are huge tea bags. You fill that about, I don't know, a third or a half, up to a half with rolled oats. And then I add to that some chili, some rosemary, a herb called wood betony, and angelica root. And I'll talk a bit about all of those in a sec. But they're all basically in different ways warming herbs. But the oats are to make a kind of oat milk. So then once I've made that, I'll pull the drawstring, pop it in the kilner jar, and fill it with cold water, by a third of cold water, screw the top on and just shake it until it goes milky, because all the starches from the rolled oats will go into the water and basically make oat milk, which is just all the starches and polysaccharides from the oats dissolving into the water and make it go milky. And then I leave that in the fridge overnight, and then I pop that in the thermos the next day and then fill it up with boiling water. And I also pop the whole tea bag into the thermos as well. So by the end of it, the thermos has 2 rooibos tea bags, 1 cinnamon stick, and this tea bag with loads of oats and the oat milk, of course, to make milky tea or sort of chai-like tea. And the tea bag also has betony, angelica root, cayenne, and what was the other one? Rosemary. And I forgot, a tiny bit of licorice root powder as well goes into there, just because it makes it sweeter, and licorice enhances the action of many other plants. It's sort of a synergist. And I think licorice probably acts that way because it contains saponins, which help the absorption of other things and the extraction, incidentally, in hot water. They make fat soluble things more fat soluble because they're literally soapy, more water soluble rather, because saponins, as the name implies, are literally soapy molecules. So the sweet tasting compounds in licorice root are in fact saponins. So the other herbs in there, the cayenne, I mentioned that I use externally. Internally, as you know, if you've ever eaten a hot curry, it's a circulatory stimulant. How do you know that? Because you'll start to sweat pretty quickly and you'll feel hot and your face will flush. But cayenne's a sort of external circulatory stimulant. It gets the blood flowing everywhere, but it really directs it towards, your extremities, I feel. Whereas the angelica root, which I put in the tea, is a bit of a central warming herb, in my view. It was used more as a digestive tonic, a warming digestive tonic, but I think there are compounds in angelica root. And again, if I can find a reference for this, I'll pop it below. But I think it's got compounds that increase the blood flow through the heart as well. So it was traditionally a herb of the sun in Leo in medieval times, which meant that they thought it strengthened the heart because the sun was the symbol for the heart and vitality, and Leo was the sign of the heart and vitality. The other plants I put in there are rosemary, again, circulatory stimulant, antioxidant, and betony, yes, which is one of my favorite plants. Amazing antioxidant, slightly anti-inflammatory, tonic, slightly relaxing, although it's rosemary, betony rather, is just a good general systemic tonic. And I hypothesize, although I have nothing to back this up other than the traditional herbals and some of its indications, I hypothesize that it's an autonomic nervous system rebalancer. It sort of like makes the autonomic nervous system is what controls involuntary or automatic processes like digestion, like breathing, like heart rate, like all that sort of automatic stuff that goes on in your lungs and your stomach and all of that. I think betony helps to reset or regulate that a bit. Because if you look in the traditional herbals, it was used for things like acid reflux, asthma, herniation, digestive problems, kidney pain. Like that is kind of used for almost everything. It seems almost unbelievable until you think, it might, if it has one sort of point of action, it could be something like the vagus nerve. It could be resetting the autonomic nervous system. Anyway, that is just a hypothesis of mine. I don't know if it's true, but certainly it goes quite well in this tea because it's traditionally a restorative. So basically, I make 2 liters of this warming chai tea, and I chug that within about half an hour after coming out of the water, and that helps me get back up to temperature much more quickly. So anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there because it's been quite a long one tonight. I thought it would be quick, but it hasn't been. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, please leave me a like. Leave me some comments if you've got any ideas about stuff you want me to cover in future live streams or videos. Please do share if you want to, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.